Scythes are commonly agreed upon to be the coolest weapon type in games, and anybody that disagrees is simply objectively wrong. Except if that somebody is me, because a briefcase that transforms into a scythe is even cooler. Hugo is here and his unique mechanic Totalize will totally obliterate your enemy health bars. So let's talk about his kit and how he plays, his best weapons, disk drives and disk drive sets, his combos, his main and substats, his teams and Mindscapes, and lastly, let's also talk about his pros and cons. Welcome, I'm Rivenous and this is your complete in-depth guide to Hugo Vlad. Hugo is an ice type, burst focused crit DPS, and by burst focused I mean quite literally that. He does one singular instance of a few million damage and then instantly ends the enemy stun window. This mechanic is called Totalize, and to better understand how this works, let's first cover his kit. While you generally could simply decide to never use his basic attacks, dodges, dodge counters, assist follow-up, dash attack or special attack and still perform really well, honestly you will probably never use that unless you play him on field, but more on that later. I still want to touch quickly on his shot mechanic, as you can occasionally use it in between your rotations if you want to optimize your Hugo just a bit further. Hugo features two types of basic attacks, with his 4-part basic attack string being called Dark Abyss Quartet, which I will refer to as basics going forward, and a second type called Dark Abyss Concerto, which I will simply call basic attack follow-up. His 4th basic attack and the second part of his follow-up basic attack are considered shots, and basically all of his relevant actions will allow you to directly transition into his 4th basic attack, which then can be followed up with his basic attack follow-up. We will touch more on that a little bit more during the combo section. Similarly to Lycaon, you can also hold your basic attack button pressed during either his 4th basic attack or his basic attack follow-up, and he will then perform a charged shot instead. He also has the shot and charged shot mechanic written literally everywhere in his kit, and it hence also applies to, for example, his dodge counter and quick assist. Regardless, I want to focus mostly on his core passive, and in that sense ignore literally everything else in his kit, because most of it just deals damage and daze and hence does nothing special. It does however interact with Hugo's core passive, and that has a lot of words for telling you if you use your ultimate or EX special while the enemy is stunned, he triggers Totalize, which then does a shitload of damage, immediately ends the enemy stun window, and also instantly restores up to 25% of the enemy daze bar. On top of that, if you pair him with either 1 or 2 stunners, he will gain 300 or 900 flat combat attack respectively. Just to make it clear, this is either 300 or 900, not 1200. This essentially means we always want to pair him with 2 stunners. Or do we? Well, we'll find out later during the team section. Anyway, furthermore, he gains 14.4% crit rate from his core talents, and when using his chain attack, or if he stuns an enemy, he will also gain 12% crit rate and 25% crit damage for 6 seconds. His additional core passive requires either a stun agent or a character of the same element, and basically allows you to deal even more damage. And honestly, that is all you need to know about his kit. I could read you his kit number by number, but Hugo is honestly incredibly simple to play on a basic level that I don't really want to waste your time any further. So let's have a look at his simplified game plan. When looking at his damage distribution, we can see that basically his entire damage comes from his EX special, ultimate and chain attacks. Well, actually most of said damage is his Totalize, which we can trigger using his EX special ultimate while an enemy is stunned, and Totalize will then deal damage depending on the type of attack used. So for example, if his EX special will trigger the Totalize, then this will cause Totalize to deal also EX special damage. And exactly because his entire kit is centered around this one large burst of Totalize damage during the enemy stun window, spoilers ahead, his best choice for his set is a 4-piece Hormone Pump. And having that in mind, we have a really simple game plan. We don't use him at all while the enemy is not stunned. When the enemy becomes stunned, we then use his chain attack twice, then follow up with either his EX special or ultimate if available. Yeah, I'm not actually joking, on a basic level that really is all you need to do. Before we get to his combos however, let's first look at his skill priority. Because basically his entire damage comes from his core, EX special, chain and ultimate, and that means our score priority will be core, EX special and ultimate into basics, and lastly assist and dodge. This effectively also means his investment on a basic level is relatively cheap, at least in terms of his skills. His disk drives are a little bit of a different matter, but more on that later. Let's first cover his combos, and the most important one we already have covered before. We start with Hugo's chain, then cancel the chain and retrigger it using another character, for example Lycaon, then a second chain from Hugo, and we end the stun window using either his EX special or ultimate. Prioritize his ultimate over EX special for more damage. If you are playing him with Lycaon, you want to make sure that either Lycaon initiates the chain or use Lycaon to retrigger the chain attack. This is due to Lycaon providing a 35% increased stun damage multiplier when hitting an enemy during the stun window, so we want to make sure to do so. We can now slightly advance this combo because his EX special allows us to follow up directly with his basic 4, and that means after performing the main combo we can follow it up with his basic 4 charge shot into his basic attack follow up slash and finish it with his basic attack follow up charge shot. Fortunately for us, the devs made this really easy for us, so here is me performing this exact combo IRL. As you can see, simply keeping his basic attack button pressed during the EX special will automatically do all of that for us, which means his entire combo boils down to pressing E and then hold left click. I would however recommend to swap cancel his last charge shot. Before we talk about his weapons, I do want to cover his sets first this time. And before that, let's make something very clear. Again, his Totalize is a singular damage instance. This means we want to hit as close to 100% crit rate as possible, because we cannot afford not having this Totalize miss a crit. As already spoiled before, Hugo does unfortunately not really have many set choices, and his by far best choice is a 4-piece hormone, which also fits his playstyle of never taking the field outside the stun window. While a 4-piece woodpecker is in theory his only real other option, I would recommend sticking to a 4-piece hormone unless you are playing him on field or have his Mindscape 6. On a side note, because you are on a 20-second downtime with Hormone, if you happen to stun the enemy too fast, that could lead to an actual big damage loss because your Hormone isn't up in time. This is especially true against certain bosses such as Typhoon, who basically want to stun themselves, but this still depends on your skill level and RNG. While I would recommend taking a 2-piece Woodpecker due to his reliance on crit rate and hence ease of build, if you can obtain enough crit rate substats, other 2-piece options come very close. Here are all the sets for the 4 different teams I have calculated, pause if you need to. Now onwards to his weapons. Hugo's signature is really good, and to find out what it does you will need to click subscribe now or leave a comment on how sexy and attractive Hugo is. I'm waiting. Still waiting? Ah, nice, good job, thank you. The Myriad Eclipse, awesome name by the way, provides crit rate, crit damage and a 25% death shred for 3 seconds after using EX special, ultimate or chain attack. To no one's surprise, this is his best in slot weapon, but Heartstring Nocturne, Severed Innocence and Zanshin Herbcase are all good stat stick alternatives. His other weapon choices kinda vary based on your team, so here are all weapons for 4 different teams on screen. If you decide to play an on-field Hugo, you can expect a nearly 100% uptime on all stacks for Brimstone, which makes it a great choice in this case. However, personally I think double stun compositions generally perform better than on-field Hugo compositions. If played with Trigger, we can now also utilize a quick assist right before the stun window, which helps us to get access to Starlight Engine's effect, which, well, makes effectively Starlight Engine just better. Generally speaking, the best options for Hugo don't really change much depending on the team, but again, here are all teams at once, pause if you need to. For his main stats, we are looking for crit damage in slot 4, ice damage in slot 5 and attack percent in slot 6. Other options are possible and not too far apart, however, in fact, while they are all very close to each other, you can choose whatever has better substats as long as you hit your high crit rate. Speaking of which, here are the substat gains as well. Again, we want to make sure to hit as close to 100% crit rate in combat as possible, and because his core passive provides us with 12% crit rate, we are looking at a maximum of 88% in the stat screen. As for end game stat goals, I would recommend 2800 to 3200 attack, 80% or more crit rate, and 140 to 160% crit damage. More is as per usual always better, and these recommendations are the one for the stat screen, so these ones right here. Let's quickly also skip through the Mindscapes. His M1 provides more crit rate and crit damage for his total eyes, which is a damage gain and also makes him easier to build. His M2 allows you to cast your EX special for a secondary total eyes after every ultimate, which means you will either gain 2 or 3 additional EX special total eyes per fight, depending on how many ultimates you will get. Personally, I found 2 to be the more accurate number. His M3 and M5 exist, and his M4 exists too. Unless you have access to a quick assist right before the stun window, which is mostly the case with Trigger and Astra, in which case it is actually an okay Mindscape. His M6 is also pretty awesome. Not necessarily in terms of raw damage gain, because it's really hard to put this into perspective because literally his entire rotation changes. Because, well, it changes his entire gameplay. Effectively, you can now run him with a 4-piece woodpecker and play him on field, which is honestly really fun. Attack percent also becomes better over ice damage at this point. And with that, let's talk about his teams. While I usually make a separate video for the teams, I have decided against that this time, mostly because I'm a little bit burnt out and also his teams are honestly pretty simple. If you are looking for a free-to-play viable option, however, I would personally either recommend skipping him or wait for another possible viable teammate for him to release in the future. I have tried Collida and also Anby and have either barely or not even hit at all 20k in Deadly Assault. I know you don't like me saying that, but what do you want me to do? Lie to you? I would much rather farm some dislikes and tell you what I think and my experience from the CES. Anyway, while non-lighter team options are possible, the effective 3-second stun pause from lighter allows him to get off 2 chain attacks without losing much stun up time, which effectively translate into roughly 300 to 400% more MV for his total eyes. That also means while lighter is probably his best partner, he is not necessary. Anyway, lighter Lycaon is likely Hugo's best option in terms of damage ceiling, but personally I've had problems properly utilizing that team and I just got scores similar to other teams. However, just because that has been my experience doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has the same experience, and on cheat, well, lighter Lycaon is still his best option. Trigger kinda wants his signature to keep up with Lycaon, and Caesar works well enough while also providing the quality of life called interrupt resistance, which to be fair in this case mainly applies to the likes of Lighter or whatever other kind of on-field stunner you are choosing. Astra, Nicole and Pulchra work as well, and you can either run a 4-piece Woodpecker and on-field Hugo here more, or basically just on-field Lighter and play as per usual. However, I found these teams to be a little bit underperforming compared to double stun compositions. Small note about Pulchra and Trigger specifically, both of them somewhat require heavy attacks and Hugo's EX special does not count as a heavy attack, which means Lighter is your option here, or whatever character you have in your last slot. For Trigger, while she doesn't really require heavy attacks, they are needed for her Tantarus shots, which make up a good portion of her damage output, and hence you will also need Lighter or another character who can actually trigger heavy attacks here to make full use of this. Lastly, for his pros and cons, let's start with his pros. He is the first male released since 5 months and his best team is an all-man team as well. He has a very unique and fun playstyle and is relatively cheap to invest into, at least in regards to his skill levels. On the other hand, he requires a good amount of crit rate substats as he wants to hit as close to 100% crit rate as possible. His teams are pretty limited to premium units, in my opinion especially lighter, and he also kinda does not really match that well into a lot of Ice Week bosses, most notably Bringer, and also to a certain degree the Marionettes, which only have a 7-second stun timer, even though their stun multiplier is 200% instead, which at least makes up for a little bit of the stun timer. His Mindscapes are average, and while he has good weapon options, most of them are premium signatures of other units, which is why I count this as a neutral. And with that, we are at the end of the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this video, leave me a comment on why or why not you are pulling for Hugo, and enjoy the showcase. Peace.